No. It's a DeLorean. What do you want me to say?
Swagger down the street with your red lips and funky beat. You better hold your head up to the sky. I'm gonna roll with you till the day I die.
Hi and welcome back to a very, very special episode because I finally get to share with you my DeLorean. When I started the channel, it was a car that I knew was going to take a while to work on and I wasn't going to be able to turn around episodes particularly quickly, so I focused on the kit cars first. It was just an easier way of doing it. But this was my dream car as a child, and I bought this about 3 years ago. I've been working on it in the background. I've been doing lots of different bits and pieces to it, but this is the iconic car that I wanted as a child. If you're like me and you were brought up in the 80s, or even if you weren't brought up in the 80s, but at some point in the 80s you sat down and you watched Back to the Future, that moment when the trailer opens and this reverses down onto the car park, and the first time I saw it, I just fell in love with it. I knew I had to have one day. And it's a dream I've been chasing for a very, very long time. And this car, I was about 7 when I watched the movie. I was 40 when I bought it. So it took me a third of a century to get this car into my life. And I would like to make a shout out, a big thank you, however you'd like to describe it, to my wife, who pushed me to buy this. She knew it was my dream. She knew I always wanted it. It was quite an expensive thing to purchase. And after years of scrimping and saving, she finally said, I think you should buy this car. Now, this is the 5th one I looked at. Over 5 years, I went all over the country. I flew to Edinburgh. I went and saw them all over the place. And eventually, the DeLorean Owners Club, who, you know, I would love to thank massively, tracked down an owner. He had 3. He had 1 in pieces, 1 he drove, and 1 that was waiting to be restored, which was this one. And it is an 81 model with the black leather interior and the manual gearbox, and it's the one that I wanted. I was born in 81. The car was only produced for 81, 82, 83, so I had to have an 81, and this is my baby. And I'm now going to take you through what I've done to it to get to this point, and then we're going to talk about what we're going to do next, and I want you to share with me the rest of the journey, getting this on the road and driving, because I'm just so excited to see this dream become a reality and pull off the drive and go somewhere in it. And I don't know if you've ever seen one out in the wild, but even for me as an owner, somebody who's been obsessed with them for years, they just blow my mind every single time. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today. Let's get through the car. Right, so when the car came in, it was a non-runner. So it's only had 7,000 miles, but it's basically spent 40 years of its life, or when did I get it? I got it in 2021. So the first 40 years of its life, it spent basically, did a few miles at the beginning and then in and out of barns and garages and things like that. And the problem is with DeLoreans is people buy them thinking they can just take it to a garage, put it through an MOT and it's going to go on the road. And there's just so much more that has to go into it. They need looking after. So this car has had basically no life. It's moved around the world. It went to America in the 80s. It came back at the end of the 90s, early noughties. And I've eventually picked it up in 2021. So basically what I had to do was work out what was wrong with it, what we were going to change, find all the issues. There was like lumps and bumps out of it. There's a couple of marks and different bits and pieces, and then systematically work my way through the car. Now, the great thing is when we opened up the interior, when we looked at the interior, we opened up the doors and we looked inside. The interior is in amazing condition, really, really good condition. There's a few little catches and bits that need fixing, nothing serious, but the leather's in great condition. And then when we look behind the seats, where you've got the electrics, you know, where you've got the relays and the fuses and bits and pieces, it looks like no one's touched it since the factory. It looks like the original, you know, electrical tape and markings and bits and pieces. It looks like it's never been played with. So I'm really, really happy that fundamentally inside the car, there's not a lot of work that needs to be done. On the outside, the wheels are tarnished and, and the paint's flaking off, and, the bumper was in a really bad state. And the wing on that side had actually been damaged really, really badly. And there are, I think it was that side or that side? I can't remember. I think it's that side. So one of the wings had been damaged really, really badly. And I actually sent it off to be repaired, and they did an absolutely amazing job. So what we did is we started at the front of the car and we tried to work our way through. So the bumper came off at the front, and the first thing we found were the headlights that had these brackets on them, were just rotten so badly. So we took the headlights out, we changed the brackets over for new ones that we're able to order from one of the Delorean companies online that sells parts, and refit all of those. And while I was doing it, I found that the electrics were actually kind of in bad condition. So the main harness comes through to about here, and there are a few of the cables are dead. If you ever cut open a copper cable or wire and you see that it's kind of like dull inside, it's basically water damage. And what you want to do is you want to trace back the wire until it goes nice and bright and copper again, and that's where you basically want to do your connections from, so it transfers the current properly. So what I did is I cut the harness off with about 6 inches spare, and then I took the whole of the front loom inside, laid it on a table, and then I ordered cables from online that were exactly the same color scheme as the original schematic, the original wires, and I replicated it. And I did it piece by piece, and I got it all laid out. And then I had the garage that was looking after the car at the time, because they didn't have the space at home, very kindly let me work from their one of their bays. And basically, when I built the wiring out, I laid it into the car, and the guys weren't convinced it was going to work first time, because it was an old car and there was maybe other issues with it. And, electrics is not my speciality. I've kind of like worked it out as I've went along. We put it in, first time, all the lights came on, the side lights, the headlights, the indicators, everything worked, and I was over the moon. And the guys had been giving me such a hard time that it just wasn't going to work. So I was over the moon that I got that right, which meant that the bumper could go back on. And so before it did, I sent it off and had it sprayed, and it's an amazing job. It looks absolutely fantastic. Moving through the car, there's a wheel well in the bottom of the front here, because obviously it's rear engine. The wheel well under the bonnet was kind of damaged anyway, and I needed access to get to brake lines and fuel hoses and things like that. So what I actually did was I cut out the bottom of it, and found that later on, one, it gave me better access and I knew I was going to have to repair it. But secondly, what I found was that when I started working on the engine, to get to the gearbox bolts, which are like right under the car, I needed the car to be over the pit, and I needed to be in the pit. And I couldn't roll the car because it was so heavy. It's only actually about 1,200 kilos, and the tires were a bit flat, but I couldn't roll the car on my own. So what I did was I would climb over the wing into the front, slide down through the wheel well and through the chassis into the pit, and then I can crawl along and I can take the bolts off or put them onto the gearbox. So I've been using that as a way of accessing the underside of the car when it's over the pit. So that's been really, really useful, but not conventional. Then we move along through the car. As I said, the interior's in really, really good condition. We don't really need to do anything to that. Quite often, the dashboard and the binnacles here, where the speedo is, they're damaged, they're sun damaged, they crack, they flake away. This is in perfect condition. I think it's pretty much lived its whole life inside. It's never been left out on a drive or in a field or anything like that. So that's in really, really good condition. So I don't want to play with that or touch it because it's all original. And then as you go through, there's things like the torsion bar and the struts that help open the door. They're in pretty good condition as well. There's no problem with those. And then I suppose what we should probably do is go to the back. The louvres were in need of a little bit of TLC, but nothing too bad. So we fixed those and then we had it spray painted. But the special bit is in the back of the car, and I'll tell you about that now. Right, so this is the bit that makes it a turbo DeLorean. Now, a little bit of history for you. The DeLorean was basically designed in the 70s, and it was released in 81 through 83 until the company folded. There's lots of movies out there, I suggest you watch them, and lots of stories about the car and what happened towards the end of the production. In that time, they made about 9,000 vehicles. There were a few that were made right-hand drive, but nearly all of them were left-hand drive because it was mainly made for the American market. But those right-hand drive ones were made by an outsourced company when they were in the factory in Belfast. Now the car is effectively a GT car, it's two-seater. When it was released, it was about the same price as a Porsche, but really, really underpowered. So this, well, not this engine, but the original engine, which is just over there, which has been in the background of some of my videos over the last few months. I haven't mentioned it. The original engine was a 2.85 litre V6 PRV engine. So PRV is Peugeot, Renault, Volvo collaboration of the 70s and 80s. Now, people said that these cars were unreliable and they weren't very well built and all the rest of it. Actually, I think it's a little bit unfair because I don't know how many British cars in the 70s, you know, you would describe as particularly reliable vehicles, you know, Triumphs and Jags and things like that. But you know what? This is a great car, and the engine that's in this, they made nearly 1 million of them in Peugeots and Renaults and Volvos going all over Europe, and you know, some of them going further afield. It was actually really underpowered. The K-Jetronic system on it, which was like a mechanical fuel injection system, wasn't great. I'm not a big fan of it. But I started stripping my engine down when I got it back, when I got the car back here, and I found that I didn't really want to go down the mechanical injection route. So what I decided to do was to find a carburettor for a V6. So I chose the Ford Essex engine, the V6 engine, which were in Capris and things like that. And I found a carburettor and I thought, right, I'll have an inlet manifold made and that will go on the top of it, and then it'll be super easy to fuel the engine, and yeah, it's not going to be particularly tunable, all the rest of it, but at least it'll work and it'll be simple, and that's what I wanted, simplicity. Halfway through the build, a friend of mine phoned me up and he said, I have to send you a video right now. You've got to see this. And he was standing behind a Metro 6R4 rally car replica that had this engine in it. Now this is a Renault Alpine GTA turbo engine from the mid-80s. When the company dissolved, Delorean was looking at having two different engines built, a single turbo Delorean engine and a twin turbo. Now, as far as I'm aware, only the two of the twin turbos were ever made, and one of them is in the UK and the other one is in America. But I don't believe any single turbo DeLoreans ever got made. When the company folded, the engine was then developed by Renault to go into the Alpine GTA, and they made, and I shall open this up for you, this turbocharged 2.5 litre V6, which generated about 200 horsepower. So instead of the original 130, which was definitely not enough, especially when you're trying to command Porsche prices, this was much better suited for the car. But unfortunately, by that time, the company had folded and the DeLorean was no more. And we were left with the 9,000 that they produced, roughly 9,000, and we are now down to about 6,500 in the world. And there is, I believe, less than 300 in the UK, and quite a few of those aren't even on the road either. So what I decided to do, I agreed with my friend that the reason he sent me the video is he said the guy wants to sell the engine, gearbox, ECU, all the ancillaries, exhaust system, turbo, everything, wants it gone because he's upgrading the car. And I said, okay, how much does he want for it? And he said he wanted 1,800 quid. And I had just bought the other kit car for my wife. And I thought this is really not a good time to go back to her having bought this the year before and say, oh, I now need to buy an engine and gearbox for nearly £2,000. I spoke to friends and family about it, and it was actually my dad that turned around and said, you're an idiot. You must buy that engine and gearbox. No one is ever going to offer you a setup like that again. And he was right. I never was going to be offered it again. So I agreed, bought it, and it's ended up here, and I started fitting it. And I'm absolutely over the moon because what I have got is a period correct, turbocharged DeLorean engine in a DeLorean. So this is basically the car that would have existed if the company had survived another year, 2 years. And I'm absolutely over the moon. I do know there's a few people around the world that have tried to do this. I don't know how many of them successfully, but I have been told in the UK, I believe if I get this up and running, and there's no reason why it shouldn't, because the video was sent to me was of the car running, or the engine running in the car. There's no reason why this shouldn't. I believe it will be the only one in the UK with a turbocharged original DeLorean engine, so to speak. So really, really exciting. And you can see I've actually done quite a lot of work. So the water system's in, the turbo's in place. We've done a custom exhaust system. The exhaust used to wrap around the back of the engine. We've now brought it across the front of, in front of the crank pulley. We then had to whip it round into the back of the turbo and put this can on, which actually came off my old kit car. I kept it. I thought maybe it'll come in useful at some point. Got the air filter on the end, and we're going to have the exhaust tip coming out here. The wiring loom that came with this engine from the ECU was in a hell of a state. Years of being chopped and changed and all the rest of it. So I did the same thing that I did with the front of the car. I took the whole wiring loom, I put it on the table in the house, and then I built a whole second loom identically next to it. And knowing that when I did my continuity tests, I knew that it would work, it would be the same, everything would match up, and that is where we've basically got to. So I've never turned this over. I know the lights work, I know the dash works and things like that, but I've never turned this engine over, and this is a really, really good time for the car to come on the channel because I get to share my journey of taking my dream car and driving it down, getting it to the point that I can drive it down the road. And I am so, so excited to get to that stage. So this is where we've got to with the car. It's very, very exciting for me. It is a lifelong ambition to have one of these roadworthy. I want to put 100,000 miles on this. I don't want it to live in a box and try and keep the mileage super low. I want to drive this and enjoy it, and I want other people to enjoy it as well. So this is where we're starting, and I really hope you come along with me for this journey. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you really soon. Take care. Bye.